This channel is supported by Truefire. Truefire is an online library
You can get the Truefire All Access Pass for as cheap as they ever do it, the $99 thing. So just jump and do that if you're looking for the best price that you can get Truefire All Access for.
So I've been thinking about this a little bit more because yesterday I was seeing some conversation around sort of Rhett Scholl and Philip Conrad that were talking about essentially like the average fee of a bass player in 2025, which was something like $350 for a Saturday kind of wedding gig. And I kind of wanted to sort of put this out there as a sort of question because I think probably a lot of people might have some different opinions on this. So what I kind of thought we'd have to start the conversation around would be like the areas where you can earn close to like a normal wage playing guitar. So I think the starting point for this really is that there is like a whole economy around this idea that being a musician is a career, right? And you know, you have like jazz schools, you have music schools and all of this sort of stuff, and you can get a degree in this stuff. And I think with it in mind that once you get out the other side, there is actually going to be a career for you playing music, and that could be your job. So that is kind of the starting point where I think I was chatting to David Beebe about this, and we've been kind of going back and forth on some of these things. We have some different opinions on this stuff, but I think ultimately our conclusion really is it's very difficult for this to be your only source of income, just playing guitar, live music, being a live musician. Now, this is not taken into consideration sort of like original touring artists particularly, because those are like a tiny percentage of a tiny percentage which actually are able to turn that into a career. And I'm assuming that if you're like me or watching this video that you probably aren't one of those, although if you are, all right. And even so, I think there is some longevity for some artists, but equally some like that's only a moment in time, and then potentially after that these people go on to do other things, right? Then I guess the other consideration is that there is a small amount of like quite well-paid work relative to what a normal person like me might be doing, which is in either West End playing, where you're playing in London like regularly, like 8 times a week or whatever, or where you're going out on tours with those original artists, and then you're paid, you know, an amount of money, fairly substantial relative to, you know, a pub gig or anything else like that, but maybe like twice what you might make for me as a normal gigging, like wedding guitarist. I should also say that this is no longer my main source of income, gigging. Like, I kind of feel quite lucky that around lockdown, I'd already been working on the online thing for quite a long time, and things sort of took over there, and it was like over the course of like that lockdown year where the money for gigging kind of totally dried up, but luckily like the online stuff kind of filled that void, and then at this point like a tiny percentage of my money is actually made through gigging, and this is what has given me like a bit of a different perspective on this, and it is why I would encourage like this idea that there is no plan B, and seeing anything else but just doing gigs as a failure, I think is I'd really tell people early on that you really want to get that idea out of your head, that it just has to be this one thing. Like, don't be a purist about it, is I think what I would conclude. So in my best year of just gigging, it was about 5 years in. I did 159 gigs, and I earned from that £19,200 or something like that. Averages on that, it works out at something like 3 gigs a week on average. But the reality of playing music as a musician is that generally you're going to be in a situation where it's pretty seasonal if any part of your work is made up with, you know, wedding gigs, or, you know, it is super seasonal. So there is actually like a window of about April to about September, but maybe like May to September, where you can really fit in, like every weekend you might be busy. Like still now, it's basically every weekend that I have a gig. But also you might have 2-3 weddings a week, or 4 weddings. That is really where the majority of your work tends to be concentrated. And then you get these pretty sparse months, January, February, you know, October, November, where actually there's a real sort of slow trickle of gigs that come in then. Ways you can offset that: you could do some abroad work if you get offered this stuff, like playing in the Alps or that sort of thing, which I've got friends who do that sort of thing as well. The reason that I focus on this wedding stuff is because this is really the only place where the money is substantial enough that you could even, I think, consider living on it. If you're doing pub stuff, like in a band, £150 per person, what you might get if you're doing okay. Another thing to bear in mind is if you can go out as a solo act, like acoustic playing and singing, then you can sort of circumvent quite a lot of this. And this is another thing that I would encourage friends of mine, that if they can sing and play guitar at the same time, do that. Really focus on that as well, because I think that puts you in a smaller percentage of people, and you might find there's more opportunities for work, and you don't have to worry so much about this kind of relatively low paid stuff. If I say to you watching this video that on a Saturday, for example, in the summer, if I have a duo in the day as well, I can earn £400 in a day doing that. I think anyone, or quite a lot of people in a normal job, might think, oh, that's quite a lot of money, isn't it, for not very much work? And I do agree with this in some ways. And this is like the part where it's difficult to say that a musician might be underpaid in some ways, right? So if you can get onto this wedding scene, which is not, I think it's different for different people in different parts of the country. Like in the southwest, this is a little bit of a destination where weddings are. Is that the same all over the UK? Possibly not. If you're closer to London, there might be more corporate gigs. You know, between £250 to £400, you can earn that on a Saturday, sometimes a Friday, sometimes a Sunday in the summer. So there is money to be made there, right? And the other thing that kind of happens is that agencies have now kind of taken over this industry, and, you know, anywhere from 20% to 50% of whatever the band is charging, that agency might be taking. So just because you're paying £2,000 for a band doesn't mean that the musicians are getting paid well in 2025. That is an area where I think there is actually quite a lot of the musicians, unfortunately, getting a raw end of the stick, for sure. If you look it up, like a binman can earn 26,000. That's like the starting salary for a binman in the UK, or, you know, nurses, this kind of thing, or a teacher, or a graduate type job. And I think this is really the area that I would encourage a musician who's like either starting out or considering these things, kind of try and look at it before it's too late. Where it's like, if you really look at what it would take to earn £26,000 from just gigging, kind of do some of the maths on it and think about it realistically, because I think it's harder than you think to get to that figure with a mix of gigs. So with pub gigs, like 26 grand, if you're getting paid £100 per gig, how many nights of the year would you have to be out? You'd have to be out 260. You know, that's like, you'd have to be out 5 nights a week. Now, I imagine you'd be absolutely exhausted after that. Equally, if you kind of up these fees, so if you say like your average wedding fee might be £200 or something like that, how many nights of the year would you have to be out to earn the average kind of wage? Earn that if you can get out 2.5 nights per week. Again, accepting that in this wedding season is very seasonal, so that means that you're going to have to cram in way more weddings. Now, the actual reality of this is you have to bear in mind that, you know, along with every gig, potentially you might have a lot of learning to do. And this is the real kicker with this, that if you're doing lots of different gigs, which you have to do to fill up a diary to any level like this, you're going to have to be doing a load of learning, and basically all your time will be spent learning material for these gigs, probably. And so this is why I would say that you I think have to consider, like, if you're not in a very, very small percentage of people, and you don't live in like a big city like London or somewhere like that, that the gigging musician part of thing should only be a part of your career, is what I would suggest. So I would encourage strongly that you be working alongside some other thing. So whether that's teaching, whether that's pursuing some online stuff, or whether it's just having a part-time job as well. I think you can view the gigging musician part of stuff in 2025 as potentially quite a good sort of part-time earner if you fall into like this wedding scene. And whilst you're young, it will seem like you're earning relatively quite a lot compared to your peers. But once you get into your 30s, that is when it's probably going to see, actually, like, these guys now have worked their way through different jobs potentially. Are they now earning quite a bit more than you? And numbers that it's just really not that possible to get through just the average kind of gigging musician job. And that is the thing where I see people, you know, just looking at things and reflecting, like, in their mid-30s and stuff, and just looking around and going, well, oh, that's the reality of gigging as a musician. So I kind of wanted to just, I think there's this idea that probably isn't the reality for a lot of people. And like a lot of you guys watching this video that have real jobs that also gig, I think you can get more enjoyment out of gigging when you're not solely relying on that for your income. It can be quite stressful otherwise. And I think there'll be a bunch of you guys in the comments, I'm sure, that do have a real job, or do some other job within music as well, or something musical or something arts related, as well as doing this gigging stuff. And I think that is where you can have this balance which kind of works out better. Like, the reality is not changing. Like, people are not suddenly going to put up gig rates. And maybe if we turn down more of the very low paid work, because we're not so dependent on it, then maybe some of those really low paid gigs, you know, just fall away. Or they get left for the younger guys who are still hungry for that kind of work. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts. Does any of this make any sense to you? And how do you get by if you're just gigging? I did it for a few years. I'm glad I don't now, because I earn far, far more money than I ever could have, like, as busy as I got. And I just don't think it was that conducive to having a family or anything like that. So, yeah, I'm glad I got off of that roller coaster.